Welcome to episode 19 of the KrassenCast. Just give us a minute as we set up the podcast, and we'll be right with you guys. Welcome to episode 19 of KrassenCast. I'm Ed Krassenstein here with my twin brother, Brian Krassenstein. Yeah, and just like last week, we are doing this episode live on Facebook, streaming on Facebook. You can get to it at Krassenstein Brothers on Facebook.com. So we're kind of taping it live, but it's also going to be on our podcast. Yeah, so you can access it on iTunes. Just go to iTunes and search for KrassenCast. It's also available on YouTube. Just search for Krassenstein Brothers or KrassenCast on there. So anyhow, we have a lot to talk about today, Brian. Trump has been on the attack again. What else is new, right? Just insanity like usual, Ed. So he's been attacking Joe Biden a lot. He's been attacking Biden because obviously he feels like Biden's the strongest candidate against him, or at least Biden has the strongest chance of being the Democratic nominee. And at this point, it seems like that's the case. Yeah, I think recent polls, Fox polls, have Biden at it's well over 50%, and Trump's well under 50%. So I think Biden's up by double digits. It's obviously scaring the president. He knows going into 2020, his best hope is to not face Joe Biden. Yeah, so Trump attacked Biden for his gaffes. Biden has had some gaffes when he's speaking. He says things he doesn't mean, and words come out that he doesn't mean to say. And he's an older guy. I mean, he's going to make mistakes, but Trump is a huge hypocrite for this. Well, you mean gaffes like how Trump said, I'm going to grab them by the you know what on that bus? Well, I don't think that was a gaffe. I think that was more like Trump being Trump. I'm talking about gaffes like Kafifi. Remember he tweeted Kafifi? Yeah. And what about, I remember that time when he thought that Nambia was a country. Nambia, yeah. Instead of Namibia, right? I believe it's something like that. I don't want to commit to anything there. But and one time he said that 2 Corinthians was a book of the Bible. It's actually 2 Corinthians, and if you read 2 Corinthians, it actually condemns people like Donald Trump. But of course, all the evangelicals ignore that. Yeah, well, so Kafifi, Nambia, 2 Corinthians, that's not it, though. I actually did some research, and I came up with some of his other gaffes. Like what? Well, we all know hamburgers. He called hamburgers hamburgers. I don't know why he did that or what. You're making me hungry. From. You want a hamburger? I want a hamburger. And so he also called Apple CEO. Who's Apple CEO? Tim Apple. Tim Apple. It's really Tim Cook for those who don't know, but he referred to him as Tim Apple. That was a gaffe, I would have you say. Well, how about all those Mexican countries? All those Mexican countries. Are there more than one Mexican country? As far as I checked, the last time I checked, there was only one. So it goes on. He thinks that Frederick Douglass is still alive. Let's see here. Oh, he spelled the country of Wales. For those who don't know, Wales is a country in the United Kingdom. He spelled it like the sea mammal. He spelled it Whales instead of Wales. I wonder if there's a lot of whales in Wales. I'm going to guess not. I don't think there's too many whales in Wales. He actually thought there was a president of Puerto Rico and Hawaii at one point during his presidency. Whether he thought that or it was a gaffe, we don't know, but I'm hoping it was a gaffe rather than he actually thinking that. That would be pretty scary if he doesn't know that Hawaii is a state. Well, and then there was a time when the president of the United States referred to there being airports during the Revolutionary War. Yeah, that was probably his biggest gaffe in my mind. Do you think George Washington would be an Air Force pilot if there was airports back then and fighter jets? I don't know. I kind of imagine that maybe the G-force would knock his wooden teeth out. I could kind of see Abraham Lincoln. I mean, this is after the Revolutionary War, but I could see him being an F-16 pilot. Yeah, I could see that too, bombing the Confederacy strongholds. Exactly. So Trump has also said that our moon, the moon of Earth, is part of Mars. Is that a gaffe, or does he really think that? I can't even follow either way, that's a lot worse than what Biden said. I'd have to say, wouldn't you agree? Yeah. Then, of course, there comes to the horrific windmill cancer that people get from living next to windmills, according to President Trump. Like I don't. It's funny because a lot of the people that support the president are from areas that have windmills, like Iowa, and and these people know that windmills don't cause cancer. They're making money off these windmills. It's funny that these people still support him. Some of them. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there who still believe that windmills cause cancer because the president actually mentioned this. Don't you think so? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. So whether it's attacking Biden or attacking his other political opponents, it's commonplace lately for Trump. I don't even want to say lately. It's commonplace since he's begun running for president. And I don't think that's going to end. I think we're going to see more and more attacks as we get closer to the 2020 election and as other candidates start to rise to the top or toward Biden in the polls. Well, they take the smallest little gaffe and they blow it into this huge deal. And then they spin it and they start telling you what he really meant when that's not really what he meant. I mean, you saw what happened with Ilhan Omar when she said some people, and that became this big deal. And it's just like it's just the machine behind the GOP. They kind of take things out of context and try and make some positives, oftentimes negatives. Well, and then you see these bots. I want to say they're bots or Russian accounts or Saudi Arabian accounts who just retweet and share these posts with these small clippings to basically make people look bad, like you said in the case of Ilhan Omar. Yeah, they cut things out of context. Actually, they did it to us, and that was what people said, that we were paid to tweet because they took a parody video of us when we were making a parody video for our podcast several months ago, maybe a year ago. And they took it out of context, and it shows we were saying, oh, yeah, the higher ups pay us to tweet and sow division. And it was a total joke. And Brian said, no, I'm just joking after that. But they cut it where it doesn't have just joking. Yeah, so we were too a part of this whole propaganda machine. You see it a lot with on the right. You see it with what's the guy's name who makes all those videos? He goes behind the scenes and tries to James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe, yeah. He makes a lot of those videos where he just cuts segments of what people are saying to make them look like they're saying something or implying something that they're not. Right. So Trump has been on the attack of former press secretary communications director, I believe, Anthony Scaramucci. And Scaramucci, as most of you probably know, had the job of press secretary, I believe. I believe it was the title of press secretary for 11 days. Yeah, communications director or press secretary, I don't know. Yeah, so he was the face of Trump's communication team after Sean Spicer left. And he only lasted 11 days. It's a little weird why he only lasted 11 days. We don't really know. But Trump hired him, and now Trump is attacking him. Right. And this was a guy that Trump praised when he hired him. And now he's acting like, oh, he barely knew him. He somehow snuck into the administration. He tweeted some odd thing to that extent. Yeah, well, he made a tweet this morning, I believe it was, and he said Anthony Scaramucci is highly unstable, not I'm sorry, I can't read nut job who was with other candidates in the primary and got shellaced. He meant to type shellacked, but that was another gaffe that Trump made. He said shellaced, huh? So the problem with that is that Trump then went on to say that Scaramucci wheedled his way into my campaign. But wheedle means he coaxed his way into the campaign, which means that he would have had to coax the man hiring him, who was Donald Trump. So Trump just basically admitted that he was coaxed into hiring Anthony Scaramucci. Yes, and he hires the best people, supposedly. So if he's hiring the best people and he's letting these people that he's attacking whittle their way into the campaign, then what's that saying about him? Well, it's saying that Trump's a hypocrite or he hires bad people, and he's, it's just dumb. It really is dumb. That's a good word to describe him. So, should we move on to the economy? Maybe there's a recession coming up. We don't know, but there's a lot of talk of a Trump recession coming. Yeah, so the last couple of weeks, I think last 2 weeks ago, the yield curve inverted. And basically what that means is that the interest rates on US Treasury bonds, instead of the curve going up as time progresses. For instance, usually the 2-year bond has a lower interest rate than the 5-year bond, which has a lower interest rate than the 30-year bond, because to lend your money to the government, you expect to earn a higher interest rate as the length of the term expands. And this is because you want to be protected against fluctuations, and there's more chance that the yield's going to go up or down 30 years from now than there is that it's going to go up or down from the current point in 2 years. So usually the yield curve goes up where the 30-year is higher than the 10, the 5, and the 2. But what happened last week is that the yield curve inverted. And that means that instead of the 10-year being a higher interest rate than the 2-year, it was the opposite. The 2-year was a higher interest rate than the 10-year. And basically what this represents is that investors and people that want to put their money somewhere safe, which is a US Treasury bond, they view the short term as riskier than this long term. So they see the next 2 years being super, super risky because that's why they're demanding a higher yield, while the 30-year length or the 10-year length of a term is less risky, which it means that they're expecting the economy in the short term to take a downturn. Well, and if you look at history, virtually every recession that we've had has had this happen prior to the recession beginning. Right, and right before the recession starts, usually I think it's about 12 to 18 months prior to the recession. That takes us right up to the election, pretty much. Right. You have the yield curve invert like it just did. And this happened in 2000 and 2001 when we had the dot-com bubble recession / 9/11 recession. That recession lasted, I think, 8 months. It happened right before the 2006 recession, where the banking crisis took place. It happened right during the Gulf War recession, where Iraq invaded Kuwait. The oil prices shot up, and that happened. The yield curve inverted. We went into a recession. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have a recession. I want to note that, because it has happened in the past, and we haven't fallen into a recession in the 12 to 18 months after it has occurred. So you can't say we're definitely going to fall into recession in 12 to 18 months, but there are some strong signs, and there's other signs too out there. Right. And how long has it been? It's been, what, 11 years since the last recession? Typically, on average, I think a recession takes place every like 6 to 10 years. So we're well due for a recession. And some of you might not like me saying this, but regardless of who was president, the likelihood of a recession in this term of presidency was fairly high. Yes, if Hillary Clinton won the election, we'd probably still be close to a recession. So I don't want to say that it's all on Trump's shoulders, but he has certainly done some things that will make a recession worse if we fall into one, and that includes trying to pressure the Fed into lowering interest rates. Whether I don't think they've fallen to that pressure. I hope they haven't, because they're supposed to be independent. But Trump's been a fan of low interest rates, which mean a weak U.S. dollar. When you have a weak U.S. dollar, that means U.S. companies can sell overseas a lot better, because it's cheaper for companies overseas to buy U.S. products. But at the same time, it's also more expensive for U.S. citizens to buy products from overseas. So Trump's a fan of the weak dollar because it helps our exports. It helps our exports, and it helps make the economy look better. But at the same time, the Fed has a responsibility to ease the interest rate up as the economy is doing well, so that when we do fall into recession, they have the tools in the toolbox that they need in order to help us get out of that recession. And Trump doesn't really care about that, because he just wants to hyperinflate the economy so that it looks good for the coming election. Right. So all that's the problem. That's why it's so important that the Fed is independent from the executive branch, and that's because a president wants to inflate the economy as high as he can go. And when we say inflate, we don't mean cause inflation. We mean inflate it as in increased GDP. Yeah, pump dollars into the economy, whether it's through monetary or fiscal policy, and make the economy jump up. But in doing that, you're going to cause inflation to rise, and you're also going to devalue our currency, which can spark a currency war, which we're kind of seeing with China, where China is allowing its currency to drop against the dollar. Yeah, so when we fall into a recession, there's multiple ways to try and get out. You can use monetary policy or fiscal policy. Usually they use both. Fiscal policies by Congress and the president, they can do things such as cutting taxes or increase government spending. Then there's monetary policy, which is controlled by the Fed, and they can cut interest rates. And by cutting interest rates, you stop people from putting money in the bank, and it makes them spend money or put it into the stock market, and that helps stimulate the economy. But if the interest rate's already low when we fall into recession, there's very little wiggle room for the Fed to actually lower interest rates anymore to help stimulate the economy. So while Trump once lowered interest rates now to help make the economy even better, the problem with that is that when we fall into recession, we can't get out. Right. So before the 2006 recession, the Great Recession, interest rates were about 5.5%. Right now, they're about 2.25%. So back then, they had 5.5 percentage points to work with, which could have been 22 quarterly interest rate drops, quarter point interest rate drops. But right now, they only have 2.2% to work with, which means it's going to eventually fall to zero. You're going to have a 0% interest rate. Are you going to go negative interest rates? Well, and the U.S. hasn't ever had negative interest rates. Well, there's other tools in the toolbox too. But basically, what we're saying is that Trump's pressuring of the Federal Reserve, it's kind of pushing their hand, and it could actually harm. Well, is it pushing their hand? Like, I don't think he shouldn't be able to push their hand. And I sure hope that the chairman of the Federal Reserve doesn't allow him to push his hand. Yeah, we hope that's the case. So also, China, the Chinese tariffs. Now, that could be one thing that may drive us towards recession, because he's basically shrinking the economy. We can't have our manufacturers can't export to China because China's putting reciprocal tariffs on our goods, and then our consumers are having to spend more. He puts a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods. That goes to the consumer. That doesn't hurt China as much. Well, Trump says that it's all going to China, which is completely false, because there's these companies who are saying that when they get taxed, when they get these tariffs, are directly transferring the tariffs to their customers and the consumers. So who are you going to believe? The companies who are actually doing this, or Trump, who wants to make his trade war look better than it actually is? Yeah. So for example, say Walmart is selling a certain battery to the consumer for $2 a battery. This is just a total random example. Now, they're getting these batteries from China. Now, Trump puts a 25% tariff on these batteries. Say that Walmart's getting them for $1 from China. Now it's costing Walmart $1.25. Now, are they going to charge $2 still to the consumer, or are they going to ramp up the price to $2.25 so they're still making that dollar? Well, they're probably not going to bump it all the way to $2.25, but my guess is they're going to bump it maybe $2.20 and take a 5-cent hit. Right. So they're going to take a hit, and the consumer is going to take a hit. So not only is the consumer going to lose money because he or she's paying more for this, but these battery. U.S. companies are as well. Exactly. So the tariffs are complicating things. I think a recent poll showed that 2/3 of the country believe that free trade's actually a good thing, and that is that's counter to the same poll that took place right at the end of Obama's administration, where I think only half the country agreed that free trade was something that we needed. So Trump's tariffs are not going over well with the American public, and I think this is going to hurt him in the polls if he doesn't do something fast. Yeah, so he might reach a trade deal with China right before the election, and it will probably be a trade deal that's not good for us, but he's going to make it out to be good for us. I could see something like that happening. Right. Yeah, and I'm sure he probably will do something like that. He'll create some deal. He'll blow it out of proportion. Say it's so great, it'll be worse than what the status quo was prior to him blowing up our trade agreements. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the economy. I guess the stock market's been way up and way down and way up and way back down. We just had to see what happens, I guess. Well, and he sees the stock market go down, so he tries tweeting something that's going to boost it up. So he's manipulating the market. So just let's hope he's not trading on these comments he's making. Right. Like who's he telling? Tomorrow I'm going to tweet this and it's going to drop the Dow 800 points. So you might want to short stocks now and buy them back later on. Yeah, I wonder if he's calling Putin or Netanyahu to tell him about this stuff. Right. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because this is clearly a president who wants to keep the stock market high. So he's going to do whatever is in his power to keep the stock market high before November. And you can't blame him. I mean, every president wants to keep the stock market high because the polling data shows that the economy is the number one thing on people's minds when they go to vote. Right. But what he's doing is going to affect our economy down the road to a harsher extent than what he's doing to help it's going to be harmed much more in the future, in my opinion. Oh yeah, and meanwhile the national debt continues to rise after he made a promise that he'd get rid of the national debt. So that's going to be that. Hopefully Democrats really push back against him during the debates and let him know that he didn't actually cut the national debt like he promised. That's just one of many promises that he didn't uphold, like Mexico paying for the wall. What other promises? There's too many to list right now. But anyway, we got to see what happens. I think that the economy is definitely slowing. The global economy is slowing, and this is a global economy. So what happens in China, what happens in Europe, what happens anywhere else in Africa, in Asia, it's going to affect our economy, and we're already seeing those economies start to sag. Yeah, so I think that's a good place to stop for today. Thanks for listening. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook. Just search for Krassenstein Brothers. We're also on iTunes. Just search for KrassenCast, and on YouTube as well under KrassenCast. Thanks again, guys.